Hey everyone, what's going on? So, a week or so ago, I stumbled upon one of Zachary K. Hubbard's live streams, and he was in Seattle, outside of the Seattle Seahawks game, educating people about Gematria or Gematria. And when I turned on the video, he was talking about the number 94. And the number 94 is this really big number that is connected to Seattle, such as how if you write out Seattle, Washington, it equals 94. And the Seahawks won their only Super Bowl in the 94th NFL season. And Russell Wilson's grandpa, once upon a time, died at the age of 94. And then Russell Wilson got traded to Denver, who equals 94. And Kurt Cobain, probably the biggest musician out of Seattle, died in 94. And he died 94 days after Bill Gates got married. Of course, Bill Gates connected to Seattle. And Bill Gates' mother died in 94. Bill Gates' father died at the age of 94. And a ton of other things. Bill Gates declared his decade of vaccines a span of 94 days after his own birthday when he was in Davos, Switzerland. If you write out Davos, Switzerland, it equals 94. There's a ton of connections to the number 94 and Seattle. But all of this is being pushed as a ritual, which I don't know whether it is or is not a ritual done by the cabal, the Jesuits, the Illuminati, the Freemasons, so on. If these things are purposely done. Because, a lot of people are omitting all of the other connections that go on in the world, and it makes these connections seem a lot more legit. And the conspiracy movement was created on purpose. Absolutely. There's even an Illuminati playing card called Conspiracy Theorists. That's why they let the movie Zeitgeist get out. That's why everybody who gets into this knowledge, you always learn about, the Catholic Church and the Freemasons and the Jews. All of these things were planned for tons of years. That's why Abe Lincoln, talked about the Jesuits being the sinister influence and there wouldn't be a civil war. And Abe Lincoln he talked about that 8 months and 4 days before his birthday. The Civil War began in the 84th year of the United States. United States of America, Gematria equals 84. The word Jesuit equals 84. How fitting, Even the anti-Masonic party was it was all about a guy named William Morgan, who equals 147. The word Freemason equals 147, And a lot of people really got into this knowledge from 9/11, which I really feel like it was created, it was done, obviously manipulated on purpose, so a bunch of people would wake up to the fact that there was a conspiracy going on. And then there's tons of other things I've talked about in these previous videos. I have a playlist here about the umbrella symbolism and that I'm going to delve into here. But the umbrella represents mind control. And when you really look at the Gematria truth community and you see the way that people are decoding, it really seems like it is a version of mind control. And just really think about it. So when you first get into the movement, you learn about all of these, the Freemasons, you learn about the Jesuits, or at least the Catholic Church. And then when you get to Gematria, you start noticing like patterns, like how Freemasonry equals 58, and how Secret Society 58, Rosicrucian 58, Red Cross 58. So then when you see a news story, what people have done is now every time they see a 58 in a news story, they say that means the Freemasons are behind it. And they don't look any deeper. They just say, oh, it's the Freemasons and move on. But there's a ton of other connections that can be made to that story. And if the story doesn't have anything to do with Freemasonry, then it is just a speculation because of the number connection. And a lot of people are missing out on things. And for years, I've been decoding without even blaming it on the Jesuits or the Freemasons or anything else. And the things that I'm talking about, and I'm talking about how my life is connected to the news stories, the things I'm talking about, the most random thing, the next day or 2 days later, that's the headline story in the mainstream media. And, I'm just making a point that I'm not coding it to any of that, but yet the things that I'm talking about are showing up in the media. So which is it? Is it the Jesuits and the Freemasons did everything? Or is it connected to the narrative that I'm following? And I've shown many, many examples of this on my channel over the years. But the thing is that when you always say everything is the Jesuits and the Freemasons, that is what the truth community wants to hear. A lot of the truth community has cognitive dissonance, and they want to hear that all of these Gematria connections are some type of cabal that is ruling the world and so on. And, there's lots of cases where I think that is going on. It's just there has to be a real narrative other than your belief inside that number that it has that connection. If it's about JFK, sure, you can connect it to the Catholic Church because, the guy died after meeting the Pope. He was also Catholic, tons of other things. But there's lots of stories that people decode, and it might have a 56 in it. They say, Society of Jesus. And it's like, oh, you missed out on all these other things because you just blamed it on the Jesuits. And that's just not how Gematria works. But once again, that's what sells, and that's what gets followers. And that's why people don't want to delve into anything more. And when you omit a bunch of these other connections, it really shows you that it's much deeper than just the Jesuits and the Freemasons. And my question is, where do you draw the line as to what is a ritual and what is not a ritual? Because, once again, if you leave out certain connections, it sure does make it seem like the narrative that people are following with these numbers means everything's the Jesuits. But when you start showing all these other little pieces, you start saying, well, man, everything works this way, doesn't it? So where do you draw the line? What is the ritual? So once again, I, suggest going and watching some of these other videos that I have in this playlist because I talk about a lot of these things. I don't want to re-explain it. I also have this one on BitChute that YouTube keeps deleting and giving me a strike for. So you can come watch this one. I think I start talking about the umbrella symbolism about the 12-minute mark or somewhere around there, maybe 14. I don't know what. I know it's further in the video if you really want to do that. But so we got all these connections to Seattle in 94, right? And think about Zach, who, he started making Gematria videos while he lived in Seattle. And that's interesting because if you write out his name, Zach Hubbard, it just so happens to equal 94. So he starts making all these videos about about Gematria while he lives in Seattle that equals 94, like Zach Hubbard equals 94. And, I've been following this umbrella symbolism for a long time, but somebody who really kind of led it on was Rambo, the guy who had the Truth Codes channel that's now deleted, but he still has a Patreon here. But Rambo has talked about how Fritz Springmeier, this guy Fritz Springmeier, has a book, and he talks about how the umbrella is a symbol for mind control, right? So it really made a lot more sense to this narrative I've been following with the umbrella symbolism. But if you go back to the Ides of March this year, March 15th, there was a Gematria Effect episode, which is Zach's radio show, and Rambo used to be a guest on that show every week. He had his own little time slot and everything else. But on the Ides of March this year, Rambo got disconnected because Zach was mad at him for calling him out or whatever was going on, right? But a lot of that had to do with Rambo and talking about Rambo believing Fritz Springmeier, right? Fritz Springmeier, the guy who is important to the umbrella symbolism and the things that are associated with mind control. And the reason that I'm bringing all of this up is because this happening, Rambo being kicked off of that episode of the Gematria Effect, is super linked to the number 94, along with tons of other things with Rambo and the Gematria Effect and the number 94. Rambo was actually kicked off of the Gematria Effect 9 months and 4 days after his birthday, 94, right? Also 277 days. And if you read out Fritz Arts Springmeier, his full name equals 277. If you read out Fritz Springmeier, it equals 94. So he gets kicked off involving, Fritz Springmeier. That's what they were arguing about, sort of. It was Fritz Springmeier. And then Zach Hubbard equals 94, like Fritz Springmeier, 9 months and 4 days after Rambo's birthday. And if you go back to 2022, remember how there was all them truth rallies, that every single one of them was all by the numbers, and it was all connected to the umbrella symbolism, even right after the OKC rally. The Zach randomly went to the JFK assassination site, and the JFK assassination site is where the original Umbrella Man came from, right? But if you go back to all of them rallies, so they did the OKC, then he went to the JFK assassination site, then to Buffalo. And keep in mind, a lot of this was connected to Skull and Bones, and then when Zach went to Yale, Skull and Bones later that year, or he went to Yale the day after September 11th, the guy with the Umbrella Man channel, on one of his other channels, he made a video called Skull and Bones that same day, and a bunch of other things that maybe I'll explain again here in a minute. But I'm just pointing out this umbrella symbolism. So we got the OKC rally, then Zach goes to the JFK assassination site connected to the umbrella. Then we have the Buffalo rally that was on Alfonso Taft's birthday, I think it was, the guy who founded Skull and Bones and a bunch of stuff. But the next place that he went was the March for Our Lives rally in Everett, Washington. And Everett just so happens to equal 94. March for Our Lives equals 94. And this was interesting because he went there on June 11th, which just so happened to be Rambo's birthday. And what's even more interesting about all of them truth rallies, so Zach actually met Rambo that year on 9/11 at the truth rally. And on the 9/11 truth rally, it rained and there was umbrellas everywhere. The same symbolism that I was talking about the whole year. Talking about how it's connected to umbrella symbolism. Then on 9/11, the big truth rally, there was umbrellas everywhere. Then the very next day, the Umbrella Man makes the video called Skull and Bones while Zach goes to Yale. And it's like, you gotta be kidding me, right? But then Zach got like a flat tire or something that day, I think it was. And the very next day, he decided to leave and not do any more of the rallies, right? So all of them rallies ended up ending 94 days after Rambo's birthday. And this gets a little bit deeper here in a little bit. I want to come back to this because the only other time I ever blogged about March for Our Lives just so happened to be about the Eagles of Death Metal singer. And his name is Jesse Everett Hughes, I believe, right? So he even had the middle name Everett in there. The only other time I ever blogged about March for Our Lives. And Everett's 94. And I'll talk about that later on in this video, but another thing I want to point out before we even move on is the fact that Rambo's channel on YouTube, he joined on September 24th, 2021, which just so happened to be Fritz Springmeier's birthday. What are the odds of that? He joins on Fritz Springmeier's birthday. Fritz Springmeier was born in Portland, Oregon, which is where Zach grew up. Like, what are the odds of that? I also later started thinking, I wonder how the Gematria effect is connected to Rambo being kicked off and Rambo first being on the Gematria effect. And I also wondered what Rambo's real name was. And there was an episode of the Gematria effect where he actually tells us that his real name is Rambo. And it was like his parents named him Rambo, and that was way before the movie Rambo even came out, right? So it's very interesting. And the word Rambo actually means raven's nest. And if you've watched Rambo at the Truth Codes, like, he has a ton of videos and a ton of posts that are connected to the Baltimore Ravens and the Ravens symbolism. So it's just really interesting that the name Rambo would even mean raven's nest. And then he has all these videos talking about the Ravens and the Raven symbolism. But the episode where you find out that his real name is Rambo was on May 29th, 2019. And that was interesting because the title was about the Hollywood Ripper. And if you write out Hollywood Ripper in Gematria, it equals 94. And I later found the very first episode that Rambo called into, and it was on April 18th, 2018, which just so happens to be 94 days before Zach's birthday. 94 days. What are the odds of that? And further, Zach's first ever episode of the Gematria effect was on the date 9/7/2016, I believe it was. And if you go to Rambo's birthday, look at this. 9 months and 4 days. Also 277 days. So Zach's first ever Gematria effect episode was 9 months and 4 days before Rambo's birthday. Also 277 days. Both numbers that link up to Fritz Springmeier, the guy with the umbrella symbolism. And in relation to Rambo's first ever episode, on the date 8/4, or April 18th being 94 days before Zach's birthday, that also means that the OKC Truth Rally last year was also a span of 94 days before Zach's birthday. And what's even more interesting is that because of all Rambo being kicked off of the Gematria effect, because of this happening, I actually bet on Jon Rahm to win the Masters, because Jon Rahm's nickname just so happens to be Rambo, right? Like Rambo. And when Donald Trump had Donald Trump's first indictment came on April 4th, 4/4, and I knew it was connected to this Batman Joker symbolism that I've followed over the years with the number 34. And when I was reading through my old blog posts about how Kobe Bryant was linked up to Donald Trump and the Batman symbolism, I saw something I posted about how I should pay attention to Rambo in relation to Jon Rahm possibly winning, and this was from years before. And I was like, that's interesting. Maybe I should bet on Jon Rahm or look at Rambo in relation to the connections to the Masters this year. And it was funny because when I looked it up, Rambo got kicked off of the Gematria Effect episode 22 days before the Masters began. And if you're at golf, it equals 22, and Master equals 22. 22 is a master number, and Rambo also equaled 22. And the Masters came to an end on 4/9, like Rambo equals 49, like Master equals 49, but they came to an end 2 months and 2 days before Rambo's birthday even, like 22 and 49, right? And then Jon Rahm ended up going on to win the Masters, right? He went on to win the Masters, and there was all kinds of connections there. They even made a thing about the number 49, but Jon Rahm just so happened to be the first Spaniard to win the Masters since 1994, and Jon Rahm was also born in the year 94. The word golf equals 94, and Masters equals 94, and it was on the date 4/9 or 9/4, which just so happened to be Easter, and Easter equals 94, like Fritz Springmeier, like Zach Hubbard, like how Rambo was kicked off the Gematria Effect 9 months and 4 days after his birthday. And even the fictional Rambo, the Sylvester Stallone Rambo, his birthday is July 6th, and July 6th is also Rambo, the character's birthday, and the Masters were won by Jon Rambo 9 months and 4 days after Sylvester Stallone's birthday even, 94. So, I mean, kind of ask yourself, how did I do this? How did I predict, how did I predict that Jon Rahm was going to win the Masters, all because of Zach being kicked off, or Zach kicking Rambo off the Gematria Effect episode on the Ides of March, and then I noticed the connection to Rambo and how it was linked up to Jon Rahm, and then Jon Rahm goes on and wins the Masters. And, I mean, the point I'm making is that everybody else was saying that all of this was the Freemasons and the Jesuits and everything else, but I never once connected it to any of that. And once again, Jon Rahm won the Masters. So where do you distinguish? Where do you draw the line and say that, everything was the Freemasons, or was it just connected to this pattern with Rambo and Zach, right? And, I mean, really, to be honest, I could go on and say that, Zach is doing this because he works for the Catholic Church, because Roman Catholic Church equals 94. You know what I mean? But I'm not going to do that. But it is interesting. A guy who has a pretty famous YouTube channel and a guy who has a radio show whose name equals 94, and he's always talking about the Catholic Church, and Roman Catholic Church equals 94. I mean, there is a narrative there. You could make that, you could make that connection. Then this is what people are doing all of the time. And they're saying that it's the Catholic Church that's behind all of this. If there's a 94 in the news, they're going to write Roman Catholic Church, and they're going to write all this stuff about Seattle or whatever, and they're going to say it's all the Jesuits and whatever. But then, never mind that Zach Hubbard equals 94, and he kicked Rambo off the Gematria Effect episode 9 months and 4 days after his birthday, and all these other connections to the number 94 with him. So when you omit all of these connections, sure, it does make it look like the Catholic Church is responsible for it. And maybe they are, I don't know. But the point is, we got to quit omitting these things, and we got to start looking at these things and looking at the bigger picture here, because There's definitely a lot more going on. But once again, this is what people want to hear. People in this community, they want to hear that everything is some conspiracy and everything is, some grand scheme and ritual. And while I do agree that things are being manipulated, that's very obvious, I think that the meaning behind the numbers is what people need to understand does not make it true, right? So sure, there is definitely a cabal that exists, but it seems with all this umbrella symbolism that they want us to have this belief that everything is the Catholic Church. And in maybe some crazy way, there is it's a complete mind fuck, and they want me to think this, and so I don't think it's the Catholic Church. I roll with that. I don't know. But all I know is that these things happen every single day. And at the end of the day, all the truth rallies are by the numbers. Everything that happens all of the time is by the numbers, Just the other day, I had to go DJ the football game in town, the high school football game. Haven't been to a high school football game for probably 10 years. And they needed to use my DJ equipment because their PA wasn't working properly. So I went down there and I set up. And believe it, the school that I went to is Booyer Valley, that equals 56. And would you believe that we scored 56 points in that game? And then like 2 weeks later, they said they were going to have a sound system, and they called me like the last minute and said, can you come to the game again tonight and set up because our stuff isn't ready to go? And I did, and would you believe that we also won with 56 points again in that game? It's like, does that mean the Jesuits made me go down there and do that? You know what I'm saying? If this was in the news, that's what people would do. But these 56s and, it doesn't have to mean that. You know what I mean? There's tons of other connections that exist. And people are just missing out on these things because they're blaming some form of cabal because they programmed their mind to have the belief that that's the only thing these numbers mean. And it doesn't mean all that. And I guess the point I'm getting at is the fact that we could sit here all day, every single day, and I could do this all day long. I could go to every news story. And I know the programmed list of numbers that people have. Every 58 means Freemasonry. Every 67 means blood sacrifice. Every 201 means the Jesuits. All day long I could do this, right? Because I see the programmed responses that people have to these news stories and how they're going to link them up to the Jesuits. It's not even that hard. Or link them up to Freemasonry. I could do that every single day because, yeah, sure, there probably is a connection of some sort. But there's always going to be a connection when you're going to connect it to the founding date of the Jesuits, and then the day it was recognized by Rome, and then Arturo Sosa's birthday, and then Pope Francis's birthday, and Ignatius of Loyola's birthday and his death day. I mean, you got all these numbers, and then you're always going to find a way to make it connect to these, if it doesn't have a 201 and it's got some other number, then that means it's got to be the Jesuit motto that they're coding. You know what I'm saying? These are all just speculations. People are just putting numbers in without having a real narrative to follow. And there has to be a narrative, right? Sure, if the story's about RFK or JFK or whatever, you can connect it to the Catholic Church because, JFK was Catholic. It makes sense, right? And Joe Biden, Catholic. I get it. A lot of these, people connected to the Catholic Church, I get it. But there's tons of times where people are decoding. And even if it does connect, it doesn't always mean that that's what it means. You know what I'm saying? Maybe it just connects that way because they are Catholic, or they have the connection to the Catholic. But it's a path. It's a narrative to understand a pattern. It doesn't prove that they're responsible for that pattern. And at the end of the day, when everything is happening this way all of the time, then even if we have a revolution and we take down the Jesuits and the Freemasons and the Jews and whoever we think is responsible, and we rid the world of the language and whatever else, things are still going to happen by a code. There's still going to be symbolism that exists within the trees, within the, within the grass. There's going to be ways that people understand the mystical side of the world, and if we have a revolution, all that's going to happen by the numbers. Everything after that is going to happen by the numbers. If we create a new a new news station where we're being more, what's our news station, it's guarantee you the stories that you write are going to be by the numbers. It will happen, and people don't recognize this because people are being mind controlled in this community. They are being manipulated to have a belief that every number means something connected to the cabal. And because of that, it's really stunting the growth of the community because so many people just move on after that, and then they're angry and they want to go do something, and it's not going to change anything because everything they do is by the numbers. Once again, that's the whole point I'm making is we have to figure out why the world works this way and delve into this knowledge a lot more. And I get it. I understand. I see that there is something ruling our minds and ruling the world. But a lot of people, I think that they are guiding the truth community too, and that's why they have the umbrella symbolism, because they are using this as a mind control technique to make people not learn and grow within the community of Gematria, because they've programmed us to believe that everything means some type of cabal. And whatever rules this world is definitely bigger than the Catholic Church. It's absolutely. There is a divine, or there is maybe it's robots. I don't know. Maybe it's aliens. I don't know. But it is way bigger than humans. It's so obvious. So just where do you draw the line, right? Where do you draw the line is what is a ritual and what is not a ritual? And why are people continually just omitting things, Because when you omit things, even maybe you're just not looking for it too, but by omitting it, it makes your narrative look like it's more legit. This is also why all of the sports picks, that's why they're not perfected, because there are multiple narratives that are going on. And, people are omitting the things that don't line up, you know what I mean? When there's 5 patterns or 10 patterns that are going on, people are making videos saying, look, it's coded by the numbers and it's rigged and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, well, you're omitting all the other 9 things that could have lined up. You know what I'm saying? So, just show the patterns that exist. You know what I mean? Show the patterns that exist, because if you omit all the patterns and you only show the one, it makes the pattern that you're talking about look a lot more legit. And that's why people can't win on, that's why nobody's a millionaire in this community. It's not because they're retarded and they don't know how to read Zach's blog or whatever, you know what I'm saying? It's because he always has more than one thing. And because there is more than one thing that it could link up to. And let's just be honest about that. That's why, that's why people aren't millionaires. Maybe some people are winning, but I've been doing this knowledge forever. I've lost 1 billion times, If you're winning every single time, then obviously it's working, Obviously you understand you understand how to do this knowledge, but I don't know anybody that knows how to do that, It's because there's multiple narratives. We need to show all of the patterns. I can't reiterate it enough. Like, we got to quit leaving out things to make it look good, to gain followers, to make money. Let's be real with this, Anyway, I'm going to show the umbrella symbolism here. And when I show this umbrella symbolism, it's going to make a lot more sense why I think that it is connected to Rambo being kicked off of that Gematria effect episode. So probably the biggest number with this umbrella symbolism is the number 186. There's some other numbers, but the number 186 is super duper important to this umbrella symbolism. And this really stands out because the first time that Zach and Rambo ever met was on 9/11 last year at the Truth Rally, or 9/11 of 2022, at the Truth Rally, where there was all of the umbrellas. And I had been talking about that umbrella symbolism, right? And if you go from 9/11 to the day that Zach kicked Rambo off that episode, it just so happens to be 186 days, a span of 186 days. And it's also just 185, which is really interesting because it was that many days after 9/11. And remember how World Trade Center equals 185, and how the World Trade Center got attacked 185 days, or a span of 186 days after Osama bin Laden's birthday. And I mean, there's other connections to 185 as well, such as, let's see here, Rambo, I thought I wrote it in here. Rambo's channel, the truth codes, equals 185, right? So the truth code's 185. He got kicked off 185, or a span of 186 days later. World Trade Center equals 185, and also 94. And then on the 185th day of the year, July 4th, Rambo decided to take down his YouTube channel and only have a Patreon. So it's interesting, you know, the truth code's 185, and on the 185th day of the year, he takes down his channel. That also means that the nation's independence, 7/4/1776, was the 186th day of the year. So pretty interesting, these two connections, 185 and 186. But July 4th, 1776 was a leap year, so it was the 186th day of the year. But just think about that. The truth code's 185. He takes his channel down to the 185th day of the year. World Trade Center equals 185. And Zach kicks him off the episode on the 185 days after they met on 9/11. And even further, I find it interesting that it was on the Ides of March, because Fritz Springmeier's birthday is September 24th, and that's also the day that Rambo began his channel. And think about the Ides of March in relation to the Julian calendar and Julius Caesar, right? And that's interesting because September 24th is 9/11 on the Julian calendar. So I'm definitely watching this date, September 24th. And there's some other reasons, such as how I said I looked up the March for Our Lives rally. Let's see if I can find it here. That March for Our Lives rally. So the other day after I saw that live stream with Zach and the number 94, I noticed that one of the guys that was with him to help him protest at the Seattle Seahawks game the other day, he was also with Zach at the March for Our Lives protest on Rambo's birthday in 2022. And so I typed in March for Our Lives on my blog, and the only other post that I have about it is this one about the Eagles of death metal singer Jesse Hughes posts anti-March for Our Lives rant. And in that post, I talked about how his name, Jesse Everett Hughes, equals 94, March for Our Lives 94. And he was also born on September 24th. What are the odds of that, you know? Same day as Fritz Springmeier. And this goes even deeper because that post was in March of 2018, right after the Stoneman Douglas Eagles supposedly got shot up and all that, you know. And, you know, the shooter, Nicholas Cruz, he was said to be born on September 24th. And of course, my grandma had just died right before that on September 24th. And it was connected all that stuff with Bob Barker, which is interesting because Bob Barker had just died. And so just making the point, you know, my grandma was really linked up to the Eagles winning the Super Bowl in 2018. And that had a lot to do with the stock market and money as well. And the Eagles have a lot to do with earthquakes. So, I mean, there's definitely something going on here. I'm just paying attention to September 24th. But we're also coming up on the 94th anniversary of the stock market crash. And stock market crash equals 185 in Gematria. Just like that connection to Rambo and the truth codes and 9/11. So we will see if there's just something symbolic that I'm supposed to see on that date. But it is interesting, the connection to 9/11, and Rambo even took his channel down 9 months and 11 days after September 24th, right? So I think I'm supposed to see 9/11 within all of that. And I'm trying to think what else I wrote here. But, you know, he first met Zach on 9/11. But, I mean, for years I've been talking about earthquake symbolism and how it linked up to Philadelphia. And then we just had that earthquake in Turkey just before the Philadelphia lost in the Super Bowl last year. We also had a bridge collapse in Philadelphia. All of these same things I was talking about with the 2018 Super Bowl with the Philadelphia Eagles and how it was played. The Super Bowl was played at U.S. Bank Stadium even. Right? Think about U.S. Bank in relation to the stock market symbolism too. So there's, you know, and we also just had the Glenn Fry of the Eagles. Then he just died. And remember, right after the Eagles of Death Metal were playing at the Paris, France ISIS attack, Glenn Fry's wife died. She died just after, who was the other guy in the Eagles that died? Maybe, trying to think. Oh, it was Glenn Fry. No, Glenn Fry died right after the Eagles of Death Metal concert in Paris. And then Randy Meisner, he recently died, another guy from the Eagles. Randy Meisner, his wife had died just after Glenn Fry in 2016. So, it's interesting that we got the Randy Meisner death. We're also coming up on the 231st year of the French Republic. And there's a whole bunch of things I've talked about Philadelphia and how it links to the Statue of Liberty that equals 231, and the Big Lebowski that equals 231, and he hates the fucking Eagles, and The Price is Right equals 231, and Happy Gilmore, I think, equals 231, and Bob Barker dying. So there's definitely a bigger picture going on here. And another reason I think 924 is interesting is because when I was writing up this blog post, I got a notification on my Snapchat, and it was talking about that I had this post about hurricanes, and I was talking about the date September 24th, and I later had talked a whole bunch of stuff about Turkey and Russia, and how Russia shot down the Turkey plane at 9:24 back in 2015, just before Thanksgiving, and how that's related to Rocky. Think about Rocky and Rambo, and but maybe I will come back to this. I want to show some of the umbrella symbolism again, though, because I want to show why it's important that Rambo got kicked off of that episode 186 days after he met Zach on 9/11. So if you go back to 2016, it was actually December 15th of 2016, there was a website that Zach had started, which there's a whole lot more that goes with this than the number 33. And I have a video on that in the umbrella symbolism. But he started this truther website, kind of like Facebook, right? But it was for truthers. And they used the umbrella logo. He says that he didn't, I believe him. He says whoever created it, they wanted to use that logo and that was not his choice. I believe that. But regardless, the website had a logo of an umbrella, right? And at the time, I didn't think that much of it. I was like, well, I know that's something important, the umbrella. But then a few days later, on December 23rd, this guy named the Umbrella Man on YouTube made a video about Zach and telling him he needs to watch out for Christmas Eve. And then on Christmas Eve, a car crashed through Zach's garage. And I was like, weird, the umbrella logo on All for Truth. Now we got the Umbrella Man. And then 186 days later, on June 28th, Zach's first ever YouTube channel was deleted by YouTube, right? That was 186 days after the car crashed into his house. And the date 628 is interesting because if you look up 628, it just so happens to be the day that leaves 186 days in the year. And then Zach did one more episode of the Gematria effect on July 5th, which is the 186th day of the year, and then he took a 2-week break from making the Gematria effect episodes. But as I studied more about the umbrella symbolism over the years, I learned that the actual Umbrella Man comes from the JFK assassination, where there's this guy holding an umbrella here, and his name's Louis Stephen Witt, that equals 186. Also, Louis Witt equals 186. And Zach Hubbard equals 186 in the Francis Bacon ciphers, or the capital letter ciphers, which are very, very relevant. I've been talking about this since 2019. And actually, I was talking about it right around the same time that I had a synchronicity with Mary Poppins, who holds the umbrella, right? And then after I had that synchronicity at work with Mary Poppins, like a day later or whatever it was, there was a story in the news about a man who blew away holding an umbrella in Turkey, which was interesting. And I mentioned how I thought there was something important to the Umbrella Man symbolism. And then a few days after that, Zach's live stream got hacked with porn. And there's a whole lot more to that. It was hacked on Jeff Young's birthday, right? Jeff Young of Megadeth, and Jeff Young equals 186. And Zach got a strike for that porn hack. And just before Zach got a strike, I had also got a strike on my channel back in February on this video I had about the Breakfast Club. And of course, Molly Ringwald equaled 186, and Emilio Estevez, who's also in that movie, equaled 186. So there's definitely something going on with that number 186. And that was right around the time I learned the importance of the capital letter ciphers, right? We had the capital letter. And think about the capital insurrection. Talked about the number 424 with Trump and all capital letters and a bunch of stuff. But it's interesting. Zach Hubbard equals 186 in this capital letter cipher. Same with Louis Witt, the original Umbrella Man. And then his full name equals 186. And another interesting thing in regards to the date 6/28, that just so happens to be Elon Musk's birthday. Elon Musk. And, you know, it stands out because once in these Francis Bacon ciphers, if you write out SpaceX, it just so happens to equal 186. And Elon Reeve Musk equals 186. But think about Elon Reeve and Musk and space and so on. And think about how Jeff Bezos from Seattle, right, went to space. Jeff Bezos, 186. Remember that story about Elon Musk surpassing Jeff Bezos a few years back? And he surpassed him with like, I think, was it $186 million? I believe it was, or $1 billion. That's what Elon Musk had, I think, in the story. Could be wrong. But that story came out 186 days after the date that Amazon was founded. And Amazon was founded on the 186th day of the year. So Jeff Bezos, 186. Think about SpaceX equaling 186. And this is interesting because if you read out Neil Armstrong, the first guy to walk on the moon, his name equals 186. And Apollo 11 equals 186. Well, yeah, right there. And we just had, a couple years back, we had Michael Collins, the other guy besides Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong, to walk on the moon or be on Apollo 11. He just so happened to die. Michael Collins died 186 days before or after his birthday. And, you know, the reason it's important to Zach is because Zach was born on 7/21, which is the day that Neil Armstrong stepped foot on the moon. And Zach also got bear sprayed in Portland a few years back, and that was all by the numbers. And I don't want to go too far off topic with it, but that was 186 days before Zach's birthday on January 16th. And that's also the day that Eugene Cernan died. And Eugene Cernan is the last guy to step foot on the moon. And then think about space in relation to Kennedy and the Kennedy Space Center, right? And then the Umbrella Man. And also think about eclipses, right? An eclipse is sort of like an umbrella, right? An umbrella also blocks the sun. And then we got the new Great American Eclipse coming up in 2024. So, I mean, there's definitely some things to be thinking about here and how it relates to this umbrella symbolism. And then think back at also Seattle, that has the Space Needle, right? I mean, there's a definite connection going on with this umbrella symbolism, how it relates to space and mind control. And then in 2020, we had the George Floyd thing, right? George Floyd. Also, you know, the Umbrella Corporation from Resident Evil, talking about, you know, a virus and coronavirus and stuff. I'll talk about that in a minute. But at the George Floyd thing, when they were protesting, there was this guy who had this umbrella, and he was shattering the glass in the AutoZone or O'Reilly's or whatever it was, the auto parts store. And over here it said Autonomous Zone, spray painted right here. And of course, breaking glass and the umbrella are symbols for mind control, according to Fritz Springmeier. It says Autonomous Zone here. And just after this happened with George Floyd, they created the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone in Seattle, and the umbrella was the logo for the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. And this just so happened to be 212 days before the Capitol insurrection And Seattle, Washington equals 212. They created this on 6/8. Seattle, Washington equals 68. COVID-19. I believe Zach's name even equals 68 as well. I don't remember if is it Zachary K. Hubbard? What his original YouTube channel was equals 68. So, interesting. Seattle, Washington, 68. They created this Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. And remember at the Capitol insurrection, the guy who died was Brian Sicknick. And then Zach, he got bear sprayed. Brian Sicknick supposedly got bear sprayed, and that's what he died from. And then when Zach went to Portland to protest Andy No's book and Antifa or whatever, Zach got bear sprayed. And that's the only time I ever heard of anyone being bear sprayed outside of Brian Sicknick. And then, I can't remember what it was, but like Zach got bear sprayed like 170 days after Brian Sicknick's birthday, and Sicknick got bear sprayed 170 days after Zach's birthday. And then just a few days later, Zach was talking about his girlfriend, Sweet Lady, and she's from Myanmar. And then there was a story in the news about the coup in Myanmar. It was all these stories were linked up to Zach. But the point I'm making is that Capitol Hill, think about capital letters. It was linked up to the Capitol insurrection. Think about capital letters. Brian Sicknick being bear sprayed. Zach being bear sprayed. And these capital letter ciphers, if you write out bear in all capital letters, it equals 186. And if you write out the word spray in all capital letters, it also equals 186. And remember, he was bear sprayed 186 days, I think, before his birthday. And another thing in relation to the umbrella symbolism is, there's some interesting things going on here, but let me see if I could find it here. Arnold Palmer. Think about golf, think about John Rahm, and so on. I actually had synchronicity with umbrellas right after all of that stuff with the Capitol Hill stuff, and Arnold Palmer tee and the umbrella. And that's part of another reason why I knew that this stuff with Rambo was probably connected to the Masters this year, because I had the synchronicity with Arnold Palmer and the umbrella. And it goes real deep here, but the post where I blogged about Rambo being kicked off of the Gematria effect, it just so happened to be a post where I also talked about Denmark, and Zach had this blog post about some drummer from the band Artillery dying, and I pointed out how it's connected to my friends in Denmark, and it wasn't just blood sacrifice and whatever else. But what's interesting is I had synchronicity back then with my son holding an umbrella that I didn't even know we had on our porch, and I went inside to blog about it, and I got on Facebook, and my friend from Denmark was the first thing that was pulled up on my Facebook or whatever. So I don't know, maybe there's something important to Denmark coming up too with this umbrella symbolism, but pretty interesting. But you know how I talked about in 2019 it was the Chinese pig year? That's kind of where that other stuff, that umbrella with my kid, kind of came together, because it all has to do with autonomous zone. There was autonomous zone on that building. Then there was the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. And there was a story about Donald Trump wanting to buy Greenland from Denmark right around the time of August 11th, 2019, this big day we were watching for. So, and that's also an autonomous zone. But that was a Chinese pig year. And I was talking about how it was the capital letter ciphers were the Francis Bacon ciphers and a bunch of other things. So there was a whole lot of things that were showing me. Zenith of the Alpha showed me some things, and I was like, wow, all these narratives I'm following are linked up to these capital letter ciphers. And that was right around the time of that porn hack in 2019. So I knew that the capital letters were somehow important, and I was following all these narratives that were linked back to the umbrella symbolism. And I thought there was going to be some type of division within the truth community. And then on August 24th, that was the day that Derek made a video about going to Anarchadelphia, and Zach got mad about that. And then that did cause division, right? I'm spelling it wrong there, but Anarchadelphia just so happened to equal 201 in these Francis Bacon ciphers. And then so does Philadelphia. What's interesting, it equaled 227 as well in relation to Fritz Springmeier and all that. But Philadelphia 201, Anarchadelphia 201, and that was also the same day Andrew Luck announced his retirement. If you go back to the umbrella man threatening Zach for Christmas Eve, Zach was following the Colts to be in the Super Bowl that year. and then they got knocked out of the playoffs on the same day his house got crashed into. So what are the odds that Andrew Luck would announce his retirement that day? And what are the odds in 2022 when Zach went to Yale to, on them truth rallies? He went there on Andrew Luck's 33rd birthday of all days. And the bear spray thing was all about 33. The OKC rally was 33 days before Zach's birthday. The Buffalo rally was 33 days after that, after the OKC rally. I mean, Zach's first blog post was 3 months and 3 days after his birthday. He tried raising $33,000 for All for Truth when he was 33 years old. I mean, the list goes on. Sweet Lady equals 33. Just tons of other connections to the number 33. He even met Derek for the first time ever 3 months and 3 days after Derek's birthday in real life. And a whole bunch of other things, but the point I'm making is I was paying attention to them capital letter ciphers, and 201, right? Anarchadelphia. That's that big number supposedly connected to the Jesuits, and it is. It has a lot of connections. But after all of that happened, when in the next following months, back in January, Zach went to Louisiana. That equals 201 in Gematria. And he was there talking about the LSU game with Joe Burrow and so on. And he was staying at room 201 at a hotel called The Trim. That equals 186, this umbrella number. And while he was staying there, he was in room 201. And this guy, Dr. Paul Cottrell, started reaching out to him. Who, it's kind of weird because Dr. Paul Cottrell, he's never been in this community as far as I know. And I've never heard of him really since. But his name just so happens to equal 201. And he was calling Zach while he's in room 201 to reach out to him about event 201 and the coronavirus, right? And then after that, that's when Zach discovered all the connections to 201 and the Jesuits. And all of a sudden, everything with 201 was now the Jesuits. And all of the 56s with coronavirus were connected to the Jesuits. But if you look up Dr. Paul Cottrell's first video he made about Zach, or with Zach, I think it was. Let me see if I can find it here. He used the thumbnail for it with an umbrella on it. Look at that. Coronavirus Call with Patriot Zach by Dr. Paul Cottrell. And he was, of course, maybe he was just using it because of Resident Evil and coronavirus and the virus and Resident Evil. But it's still interesting. The first video he uses the thumbnail of an umbrella, which makes me think that all of this has to do with mind control, right? So that's how we learned about 201 and the Jesuits, right? So it makes me think they programmed that 201 to make everybody think that it means the Catholic Church is behind everything, right? The 201 and coronavirus. And then they know that we're watching this, so they can just keep creating stories, and we think that it's all the Catholic Church. And it is interesting, though. The 186 is very big in relation to the Catholic Church, right? And so maybe it is the Catholic Church, and for whatever reason, they're trying to mind fuck us into this belief or something. It seems so much deeper to me, but like I said, I don't have all the answers. That's why I make these videos, to try to come up with the answer, But it still doesn't take away from the fact that people are decoding wrong lots of times. You understand what I'm saying? Where they're, they see a 67 and they write blood sacrifice and whatever else. None of that makes sense. There has to be a real narrative, right? Here there was a narrative and how it's connected to the Catholic Church and the JFK assassination, And, it's even funnier too. I made that video about Bob Barker and The Price is Right and how it was connected to the Jesuit theme I was following in 2017, and the guy with the perfect showcase reaching out to me, and how the Vegas attack was connected to the Jesuit theme. And notice that Terry Neese, the guy who reached out to me from The Price is Right, the perfect showcase, his name also equals 186. So, it is interesting. This number seems to be, it just makes me wonder, like, even the OKC Truth Rally, it was influenced and inspired by a story about the Oklahoma, or the Texas synagogue shooting, I think it was, right? And then 3 days later, Zach made that 33-minute video. And then there was a story about one of the survivors of the Oklahoma City bombing who had died in the news that same day. And, you know, that was 186 days before Zach's birthday. So, you know, it is interesting the way it links up to, it just seems like they've influenced things. They influenced that want to do the OKC rally, and then all of these other things kind of just manifested themselves out of it. Or maybe, you know, there's a turd in the punch bowl, right? I don't know. I don't think that for sure, but it's interesting. You go to the JFK assassination site the next day, and, you know, all the umbrellas at 9/11. It's like, you know, the point is that I don't think that we fully control our thoughts and whatever else, right? And even think about after the OKC rally being inspired, right? Then we had the Bengals in the Super Bowl, and you had Sam Hubbard, who wore number 94 for the Bengals. And then Cooper Kupp, the guy from Yakima, he wins the MVP, right? Cooper Kupp. His name equals 186. He's from Yakima. That's where Zach had lived at the time. And then later that year, Cooper Kupp's grandpa goes on to buy Zach's old house when Zach moves to Prosser or whatever it is. It's like, give me a break. Like, nobody finds that interesting, you know? They got 186, the Cooper Kupp's grandpa. It's like, and we just kind of move on like it's no big deal. Like, that is craziness. There's even, in relation to Yakima, it's also interesting too, because there's a bunch of videos on YouTube where people claim that the Umbrella Man channel, that guy is actually Sam Kinison, which is really weird, but Sam Kinison, also born in Yakima. It's like, okay, that's pretty weird. Links up to the umbrella symbolism even. And, I mean, to go even deeper, you know, in relation to 56, the Jesuits, right? It's interesting if you remember the episode, the 56th episode of Zach's original channel was when he says that he might be a Greenblatt. Like, how interesting is that? The 56th episode, the one that everybody always uses and says that whatever. But the 56th episode, look at what happens if you write out Zachary Greenblatt. Like, I mean, you can't even make this up. It equals 186. And remember the Buffalo rally? Remember how the Buffalo Bills got eliminated from the playoffs 186 days after Zach's birthday last year? That was the team that he was following, you know, even though he says he wasn't, but he was. He was following the Buffalo Bills. He did mention the Chiefs, but once again, it goes along with that same thing where I'm talking about. There's multiple narratives, and there was never an official thing, but what are the odds the Bills would lose 186 days later? Hold on, buddy. And then DeMar Hamlin collapses, 186. And you know what else is interesting about the Buffalo rally is Jeff Young equals 186, right? And remember, the porn hack was on one of them was on Jeff Young's birthday in 2019. But you also had, who is it? Dave Stain, that equals 186. But the Buffalo rally ended up being on Nick Menza. Let's see here. Connected to the day that Nick Menza died. He was a drummer in Megadeth. And, you know, Jeff even asked Zach to decode this guy's death once upon a time. But I guess the reason I'm bringing this up, though, is because after Buffalo got eliminated from the playoffs, right after the Super Bowl this year, Jeff Young is on tour with the Kings of Thrash, and one of their concerts got canceled, the one in Buffalo, because of a fire. It's like, what are the odds of that, you know? Their show in Buffalo got canceled once again, you know? And I really don't think that, like, this is done on purpose or anything of the sort. It's just, this is how it links up. And once again, it goes back to, where do you draw the line? Where do you say this is a ritual and this isn't? And maybe this was some type of ritual, but at the end of the day, that means that we are all being controlled and manipulated, and certain things are happening at certain times because something else is controlling us. So we don't even have any control. If you don't have any control, then that means they want you to be talking about the things that you're talking about. Does that make sense? And maybe, you know, maybe it's happening to me too. Maybe I'm making this video because I'm supposed to be making this video, and they want me to bring this information up, and maybe there's a specific reason, but there is also a lot of interesting connections with conspiracy that are connected to 186. Like conspiracy equals 51 in Gematria, right? Conspiracy equals 51. And think about Area 51. The word moon equals 51. JFK equals 51. 9/11, if you read it out as words, it equals 51. Think about zeitgeist, right? Zeitgeist, that equals 51. The Illuminati was founded on 5/1 by Adam Weishaupt, who equals 51. Once again, I'm telling you, they programmed you. They wouldn't have let this movie get out unless they wanted it to get out, right? The word umbrella also equals 51. But the point I'm making is Zeitgeist actually came out in 18/6, which is interesting. And, think about all the stuff with the moon landing in 186 that I showed before. And 9/11 actually was a span of 186 days after Osama bin Laden's birthday. And, the United States founded on the 186th day of 1776, the same year the Illuminati was established. So this number, it's definitely important to, and it links up to the Catholic Church. It really does. But at the end of the day, to me, it seems like it's all about mind control and the belief that everything is the Catholic Church. But once again, maybe it is all the Catholic Church that's kind of screwing with us, Another 186 that if you go to the Jewish cipher, I guess it's called Latin on here. I always use the old calculator. I still use the old one, but if you read out TFR, well, maybe that's not what it is. Well, let's go here. The Jewish cipher down here. TFR equals 186 in this Jewish cipher. So, once again, another 186 connection to the Gematria effect. It's just insane. So definitely just paying attention to September 24th. I just feel like there's something important I'm supposed to see on that day, or maybe we're going to get something connected to this narrative. There's definitely something going on with it. And, I had synchronicity with Umbrella the other day too. On Friday, I was thinking about all this Umbrella stuff, and I was thinking about making a video, and it was like lightly sprinkling out. This looks a lot worse than it was. I just wasn't turning my wipers on, and I was on the interstate. I came off the interstate, but I got to like Missouri Valley, Iowa, and I noticed, I was thinking about the umbrella symbolism, and I looked up, and I was in like a construction thing, and there was a construction guy holding this gigantic umbrella. And I was like, that's crazy, because I don't usually see construction guys holding umbrellas. Usually they just, whatever, they don't use umbrellas. I barely ever see that. And I thought, oh, who knows? It is raining. Not a big deal. Whatever. So I drive another 20 minutes or whatever it is to get to Council Bluffs, because I was going to a meeting so I can get a loan, because this has been the ridiculous. I think there's a hex put on me this year with money. It's been insane. I have it's just crazy, but I pull into Council Bluffs and I get to the first stoplight, and there's a car right next to me, and it has an umbrella on it, and it says Umbrella Corporation. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me, Like, it's one thing to see a guy holding an umbrella when it's sprinkling out, but then to when I get to the town I'm going to, and I roll up right after, I take exit 56, by the way, and I roll up to the first stoplight, and then there's a car says Umbrella Corporation parked right next to me at the stoplight, and they have an umbrella on the car. It's insane, but that was 56 days before my birthday, right after I took exit 56, and it was 56 days after Zach's birthday, and it was in Council Bluffs, Iowa, that equals 191, right? Like Society of Jesus equals 56 and 191. And then I went to that meeting or whatever, the loan place, and the loan place is One Main Financial that equals 94 and 277. The Fritz Springmeier umbrella numbers, right? And I never thought about it until I was halfway home, but the bank place or the loan office, it was closer to the other side of town, so I took a different way to my house. It's like an hour away, but I took the different highway, and as I was driving down the road, I was like, dude, I'm on Highway 191. What are the odds of that, Highway 191 on the way home after going to Council Bluffs, taking exit 56, running into the umbrella, the car with the umbrella on it. I mean, and then the place I went has these two numbers connected to the umbrella symbolism in 94 that I was thinking about. And then there was a story recently in the news about this JFK assassination guy, right? Also a story about RFK and a possible assassination attempt or whatever, and a ton of other things with this. I'm going to end the video here. I keep running out of space on my computer, and my kids are home now. I was going to keep talking, but I guess I'm going to need to pay attention. I'm just paying attention to September 24th. It seems significant, especially with this Everett. This guy's middle name being Everett, linked to the Eagles. I guess I never looked to see who the Eagles play this week. I don't think, anyway. Bataclan Theater equals 94. Maybe it could be something with France. I've been talking about France for years. There's lots of connections to France, it seems. And, that's where the Jesuits were founded. So it's fitting for the narrative with, the umbrella, I guess. Ides of March. Stephanie McMahon, her birthday is 9/24. That's the day that Stone Cold Steve Austin came back after his surgery that he got hurt from Owen Hart that I talked about in the previous Bob Barker video. And Stone Cold's song is The Glass Shatters, right? The Disturbed song. So once again, links up to the mind control symbolism. Fritz Springmeier will be turning 68 years old, too, on 9/24. Like Seattle, Washington, like Zachary K. Hubbard. Like how the Seattle Autonomous Zone was created on 6/8 with the umbrella logo. Just linked up to my son as well, but skip over that. So, whatever, just following the patterns. Once again, where do we draw the line as to what is a synchronicity or what is, a ritual and what isn't? Because, it seems like we're being used. It seems like, it seems like you're being programmed with certain thoughts and everything you do is supposed to be happening. So I just don't see how we're going to, fix the world without understanding this knowledge more. And we're not going to understand it if everyone just does these simplistic decodes and programs their mind with that each number means something connected to the cabal. So I hope that makes sense. Have a good one. Peace.